We are currently recording, just so everybody knows. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I have spotlighted Leah Zimmer and Monica Ladig for everyone, so hopefully they are front and center on your screen. I just want to give a quick introduction before I introduce Leah and Monica about this program, and why we're having this webinar. So thank you for joining us on the third webinar in our High School Immigration Fund. The City of South Bend is teamed up with and focus to help attract international talent to the South Bend region, and to help de-risk the hiring of international talent for those companies who may be sponsoring H-1B visas, and the risk that comes with that. So this is the third webinar in our series, and this one is titled How to Prepare for a Career in the United States. This is specifically targeted towards students and other international people who are going to be looking for work here in the US. I wanted to let you know as well that you can find out more information about the High Skill Immigration Fund at the website that I'm going to list in the chat. I also wanted to let everyone on this call know that in 2 weeks from today, on April 25th, there will be a career fair hosted by the City of South Bend, specifically targeted for international students and international people looking for careers in the US. I'm going to send you that link in the chat as well, because I just want to make sure that everyone knows about it. Feel free to ask any questions at the end. We have a Q&A function in this call. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know that Monica will also have to take off promptly at 1, and we will probably start Q&A around that time or earlier if the presentation ends earlier. So thank you so much for being here, Monica and Leah. Monica Ladig is the Student International Business Council Director. She works at the Career Center at the University of Notre Dame. She's an advisor and program director. So she has over 17 years of experience in student advising, and so she's very much an expert. Leah Zimmer is also at Notre Dame. She's the Director of International Student and Scholar Affairs. She is also an expert with over 8 years of experience helping international students navigate careers. So I would like to turn it over to them now to not waste any time. And please keep yourself muted if you would. We will have time for questions at the end. If something comes up to you in the meantime, feel free to put it in the Q&A section. But I will now turn it over to Leah and Monica.
Great, thanks so much. It's wonderful to be here with a good crowd today to talk about employment in the US and opportunities and authorization and all of the many topics. I think Monica and I have a list of things that we're going to go over just sort of generally to think about, and then hopefully your questions will inspire more conversation. Like Ali said, my name is Leah Zimmer, and I'll just say my primary responsibility at the university is to ensure that our international students who are studying with an F or J visa understand what work authorization looks like, what the benefits of that status, of those two statuses are in the US, so that they can work during their programs and after graduation. But my office also manages the Notre Dame sponsored employment immigration, which is a little bit different than if you are looking at a business in the South Bend area, in the Michiana area. that process is a little bit different, but we do also manage the employment immigration for the university. And so it's a real pleasure to be here, and I'll turn it over to Monica to share a little bit more about what she does.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks, Leah. Yeah, I'm Monica Ledig. I have been at the University of Notre Dame for 17 years. That's crazy. But proudly, I've had the opportunity to oversee our Student International Business Council, which is an endowed program at Notre Dame that definitely involves a lot of our international students, but also welcomes others. And it's an experiential learning program so that students can get business experience prior to graduation. And then in addition to that, I help international students sort of navigate the challenges, the additional challenges that international students sometimes face when looking for jobs in the US here at the Morello Family Center for Career Development at Notre Dame. So we're both so super excited to have this conversation and answer any questions that you might have, because we do understand the excitement, but also the some of the reservations and hesitations and questions that you might have. So super excited to be here.
So one thing that might be helpful is if everyone on the call wouldn't mind putting in the chat, kind of what is your situation? Are you a student in the US? Are you outside of the US and just looking for opportunities in the US? What brings you here today, basically? And that will give us a sense of how to jump into some of the topics that we're going to talk about. So just quickly, kind of where are you in the US, outside of the US? What's your interest in working in the US in this area? Are you already a student, or are you hoping to come to the US to be a student and then work after graduation? Are you hoping just to come to the US? That would be really helpful. You might have put that on the registration form, but just for ease of kind of seeing who's here, that would be great. So I thought one thing we could start with, Monica, we can jump in on the question of what does employment look like in the US? I can talk from an authorization standpoint and what people have access to. What are some different statuses that people tend to work in the US with if they're a foreign national, so a non-US citizen. And then Monica, maybe you can talk a little bit generally about your experiences with the different kinds of work that we tend to support students in. So if you are looking to work in the US with an F1 visa, then you would be eligible for a work authorization called CPT to access before you graduate for different internships, or you'd be eligible for OPT, which is optional practical training, which students can access after they've graduated. They've finished all the degree requirements, you have a diploma in hand, you're like, now I'm ready to work in the US after studying for 1 year or 4 years. If you are in a STEM field, so science, technology, engineering, math, then you are eligible to apply for up to 36 months of work authorization in the US. If you are in a non-STEM field, so you're in arts and letters, maybe some general management business courses are actually non-STEM, and that is designated by the US government and the institution. But if you're non-STEM, then you would be eligible for 12 months of work authorization. And what's important to remember about that is that the F1 OPT, you are still sponsored by your university. And so one thing that we hear a lot about, our students ask is, does this employer do sponsorship? And often you don't need to have that question answered for the first 12 months or 36 months if you're graduating with an F1 student visa and to have a diploma with an F1 student visa. A J1 student is going to be able to access something called academic training. So that allows them to also work in the US for 12 months to 36 months, depending on their program type and their degree type. And then a couple of others, we talk about the alphabet soup of working in the US that are not related to being a student in the US. And it looks like almost all of you are students, and so that's fantastic. We're so excited. Congratulations to all of you who are graduating this May. I'm sure that you're hearing a lot about the things I'm talking about from your international offices on your campus. So what's really great about working in a community like South Bend with an F1 visa is that 12 months to 36 months really allows you to create a lot of impact in a community of this size. And there's lots of opportunities to be engaging with different kinds of employers and different kinds of experiences. The other visa categories that people might work in the US with would be the H-1B visa, which is typically going to be sponsored by the employer. typically going to be accessed through the H-1B lottery that just happened last month. Some of you may have been familiar with that. A second category would be an O1. And so if you are just graduating from university, you probably are not going to be eligible for that O1 because that has to do with extraordinary ability and specializations and skills. And often they want to see maybe 5 or 10 years of experience being extraordinary before the US government is going to give that work authorization. And then there's a couple of others, but I'll just mention the third one is if you're from Canada or from Mexico, you may have access to something called a NAFTA TN visa, which allows you to work in the US as well with any employer. What's often important to remember is that F1 and J1 sponsorship, those are not employer specific. That's connected to your major. Any employment that you're participating in with an F1 student visa OPT or J1 academic training, it has to be related to your major, but it's not employer specific, so you can move employers. Those other work authorization categories I talked about are actually employer specific, and so that's important to recognize as you're thinking about getting employment in the U.S. So Monica, I'll turn that question over to you, kind of from your perspective. What does employment look like in the U.S. Now that I've talked about kind of the authorization piece?
Yeah, great. So so I think, it's really good to start with the good news. So many U.S. organizations value the diversity that international students will bring to their organizations and businesses. So I think it's important to start that way. I was looking in the chat to see, as we're kind of all over the place, we have graduate students, students about to graduate. So if you're about to graduate or near graduation and you still haven't found your full-time opportunity or an opportunity, don't worry. Many students are hired between April and June. And here at Notre Dame, that's something that many international students are facing, but I totally understand any reservations or the stress of the time feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't have a job yet. But, if you really put the strategies to play, I think that you will find great success because there are definitely companies looking for you. So I think the next question on here, I saw what are some examples of positions that our students that we see going out. So we see them accepting positions as project manager, software or hardware engineer, of course, account executive, financial analyst, business analyst, social media manager, marketing coordinator, web developer, customer service representative, lab technician, depending on your majors. So there's just, more jobs than I can spend time telling you about, but those are some of the ones, and data analysts that we see over and over again that our students are excited about applying for. So I think, most of you probably have got your have your US resume, but if you don't, or even if you do, it might be a good time to talk with someone in your career center, have them look it over. A lot of times, maybe something that students forget is that you don't want to put everything you've ever done on your resume. You really want to tailor it to the positions that you're most interested in. So maybe if you've done some research ahead and you understand recruiting timelines, or if you're kind of down to the wire here and you're kind of open to multiple industries, it can still really benefit you to tailor your resume and maybe have one resume that's specific to one industry and another to another, because recruiters spend about, maybe at top 6 seconds looking at the resume. So that top third really needs to get their attention. And that's your education, your GPA, your skills, your languages, and your most relevant experiences to the positions that you are applying for. Everything else is great. You need to have that there to show that history, but that's really the powerful area that could be good to concentrate on. And then having a good friend, or maybe someone who has already gone through the process, review it for you, or definitely someone from your career center. That's part of the tuition package. So you really should take advantage of helping or letting them help you improve your resume and make sure that you are showcasing yourself to the best level that you can. I think I mentioned if you're, not down to the wire, then, really understanding recruiting timelines can be helpful. Finance and consulting, those are very early timelines. So understanding that to get those jobs, it is more likely to have more openings earlier in the year. But marketing, advertising, promotion, a lot of engineering positions, they kind of recruit throughout the year. But the two big ones that we see a lot of at Notre Dame are finance and consulting, banking and consulting, and those are very early timelines. So kind of setting yourself up to understand what you're up against can be very valuable, and it can also alleviate the stress of, what am I doing and how am I going to get this opportunity? So after the resume, then it can be important to really let everyone know in your circle and maybe a little outside your circle of what you're looking for. You never know who is going to have a connection or who is going to have an idea of where that they might refer you to. And many, many people in the US get jobs, including international students, through someone they know. And it can be a lot of different ways, but definitely you want to check with your career center, look at what are the tools that your school has. At Notre Dame, we use Handshake as our job platform. And that's, we've found that to be super helpful. But in addition, you could look at myvisajobs.com and look at who are those top companies that sponsor international students time and time again. And you can also filter in there for what positions. And that can be super helpful because not every company or every organization is going to be able to hire an international candidate. Although I think the way you present yourself, the way that Leah kind of explained, can really go a long way to helping, because there's a lot of misunderstandings thinking they have to sponsor you right up front. And that's a put off for some smaller companies or people that don't understand the process. So really being armed with that information is very powerful as well. And not jumping right into it, but as it's natural and comes up in the conversation, bringing that up that you have work authorization from your university can really be powerful, because like I said, there's just a lot of misunderstanding and then a lot of stress over, like, oh, do I bring it up or does she bring it up, or, so you kind of taking ownership of and knowing what is your work authorization can be really helpful. Then having a elevator pitch can be helpful, so that as you're spreading the word about what you're looking for or what you're most excited about looking for in the US or outside the US, it can be helpful. So getting it down to a very conversational but quick, maybe 2 to 3 minutes introduction. That can also be very helpful if you go to a career fair or just you're having a casual conversation with someone in an elevator or anywhere else, really. That's kind of where that name came from. You just, like I said, you just never know when you're going to make that connection and when someone's going to say, oh, we have openings, at my work, you should apply here, or, hey, I know somebody you can talk to. And in that same vein, really connecting with your alumni, your young international alumni from your schools can be, it can be very helpful because they've just recently gone through it successfully. So they're out in the US working. They just went through everything you're going through, and they can help you understand what kind of their best practices were for getting the job that they got. And then also they may have connections, like I said, which can be very, very helpful. Let's see, I feel like I'm rambling.
I think I would just add again, just reiterate something that Monica just said, which is what we often hear students talk about is just a little bit of desperation around the sponsorship. And they want to ask that right away. And you just want to find out because you don't want to waste your time talking to someone who isn't going to be able to provide that long-term opportunity. And one of the things that we talk about with students a lot is every conversation you have is preparation for your future opportunity, for the right opportunity. And so to be hyper focused on sponsorship, sometimes that shuts the conversation down right away. And I think we can feel desperate, like I just need to know, can you do this or can you not? And what we would recommend is that you approach every conversation with an employer as an opportunity to learn more about yourself as a candidate through questions and through conversation with them, and to learn more about what kinds of positions are actually interesting to you, and learn more about what Monica was talking about at the top of your resume, at the top of your cover letter, capturing what makes you a unique, distinct, interesting candidate. And we strongly believe in our office and at the university that our international students are incredible candidates and bring so much, if not more, to places of employment and to the employers. You bring so much with all the experiences of having to navigate school in a different country, to navigate a different culture. And so being able to practice talking about that as a strength, every employer you talk to gives you that opportunity to have that conversation. And I think that's more useful than a fact check of whether someone is going to sponsor you or not in the future. Is it important? Yes. But if you haven't already had this experience, you will find that can shut down the conversation, often because of what Monica said. It's just ignorance, right? And you don't want to be the person in a first conversation educating the employer about what might need to happen for your visa status. So focus on yourself as a candidate. And if you get shut down or you get pushed back because they're like, well, are you authorized to work? And you have to say, I am for 12 months or 36 months, and the employer doesn't want to keep talking, you have still had an opportunity to talk about yourself, your candidacy, your connection to that position, to that employer. And that practice is so essential. The second thing that I would just say is one of the things that we, in terms of accessing opportunities that we're finding more and more, is that for the online application, employers are getting much more specific about how to determine whether somebody has sponsorship or will need it in the future. And that's why the relationships that Monica is talking about are also so essential. Because if you're talking with somebody and they know you, and you are not just filling out a blank application and submitting that and having to answer this question about sponsorship on an application, then that relationship is going to get you that much further. The third thing, I think third thing that we've seen is really just the creativity in which students are connecting with opportunities. So it isn't that, oh, everybody in my field is going to this employer. Everyone in my field is connecting with this kind of job. Monica listed a lot of different positions, and you've all been doing the research. You know why you got the degree that you wanted and what kind of position you were thinking of. One of my favorite conversations was with one of our chemical engineering students who had a position at a bank in finance. And when he first came in to talk to me, he was like, I have this amazing position and I want to do it, and help me do it. And at first I was like, man, this doesn't connect to your major. It doesn't connect to what you came to study at the university. This opportunity may not be for you. And you may not be eligible to access it because of this authorization requirement. But as we got talking, he was like, no, wait, this position required me. The position description required that I have a degree in chemical engineering at this bank because they want me to assess chemical engineering companies, right? So they needed that. So that student was able to be really creative. There wasn't this direct connection. And there's 100 different ways to be creative about the kind of employment that you're looking for. And since most of you are F1 students, it has to be connected to your major, but there's lots of opportunities to think creatively in that space. So those are just a few things I'd add, Monica, to what you were talking about. And there was a fourth one, but it has gone out of my brain, so it'll come back later. If you want to start talking about a little bit more about the career fair, especially since that's coming up on the 25th. Oh, you're muted, friend.
Yeah. Absolutely. So just one more plug, make sure your resume is as good as it can be. Get that help if you need it. And then, yeah, going to a career fair, probably the best thing you can do is start researching the companies and organizations that will be there before before getting in line and or getting in the queue to talk with different employers, so that you're empowered, you understand not just the industry, but also, you know, a deeper dive into what makes them unique. Many employers we talk to say, you know, that they have students coming to the career fair to say, you know, they want a job or they want an internship, but they haven't taken the time to look at what makes them unique. They're just kind of like going all over the place. And so they really value candidates that have taken that time to understand who they are, what they're offering, and can very easily share how they have the qualities, skills, and accomplishments that that person or that company is looking for. So taking that time to do that deep dive is very important. And then that's where the elevator pitch can come in, because you're only going to have a little bit of time to talk, and it's important to get people's attention quickly. So being able to concisely and naturally explain who you are, what you've done, and what you're looking for and excited about goes a long way. Then it can also help too, depending on, I'm not sure how this career fair is going to be set up, but many of them you can look ahead of time to see if they have hired international students or are interested in international candidates. And like I said, so many employers are definitely looking for the skills, accomplishment, language skills, and multicultural fluency that you all have. So the research ahead, being able to make the conversation natural and memorable, hopefully. Then probably the most important thing, which no one likes to do, is the follow-up. So after you've had that great conversation and you're thinking, oh, I hope they call me for an interview, or oh, I hope I can hear more from them, really it's on you to get back to them. To restate your interest, because they're going to talk to hundreds, if not thousands, of candidates, and a lot of really highly qualified ones. So the people that really get their attention are the people who follow up, the people who are saying, I really enjoyed our conversation. I just wanted to let you know that I'm very interested. Maybe you attach an updated resume, even if you've only tweaked it a little bit, just as another kind of excuse to get back to them with more information. And then always trying to find out, like, what are the next steps in their hiring process is important. And then continuing that conversation at times can be helpful, because sometimes they're not hiring right away, but they're still thinking about you, and they're, you know, so continuing that conversation can be very fruitful as well. So maybe you don't hear from them for 2 weeks, and you just check back in 2 or 3 weeks, you know, to let them know you're very interested. You're still wanting to hear more about their opportunities. So it can be hard, I know, and keeping it all organized can be can save you a lot of stress. So who have you talked to? Who have you followed up with? Maybe keeping a spreadsheet like that. And and then maybe connecting through LinkedIn with other people who work at the company that you're super excited about. Like, for instance, if you were talking to someone at EY, you could look up other people from your school or from your area that work at EY, and maybe reach out to them to see if they'd be open to having a conversation, because you're really interested in finding an opportunity there. And a lot of people will. And then your alumni association can be powerful too with that. So yeah, the follow-up is like the key. They're not always going to just right after the career fair, you know, knock on your door or call you or send you an email right away to say, hey, we're interested. But the candidates that show that resilience and that follow through always stand out. And the other thing I would say, to build on what Leah said, was that a lot of times, you know, international students have a lot of other friends that are international students. So they don't realize that so many people in the US don't speak an additional language, for instance. That a lot of times international students are only thinking of the negatives of the job search, but there are the positives too, which are definitely, obviously you're studying in a completely different language. Like, how cool is that, and how powerful is that? And in addition to that, you may have connections. I used the name EY earlier, but maybe back home there is an EY office. And in the summer, you might think about interning or job shadowing at the EY office back home. And then when you come back to recruit again in the fall, you have that on your resume. Now, that's something most US students can never do. So that's very empowering. We've had many students land their job, their full-time opportunity, or their junior internship that leads to a full-time opportunity in this way, like working at Goldman Sachs in, say, in Chile, then coming back and recruiting with Goldman Sachs here, and already having been successful with their company, they kind of rise to the top. So I definitely want to, remind you that, everything that you have to give that is over and above what many of your competitors or competition have are what employers really highly value. So
I think one other thing that I had been thinking about earlier, based on some things that Monica had said, was also just about the application and making that really specific. My office is actually in the middle of hiring somebody right now, and one thing that's really struck me, and so I will take the opportunity here, is when it's obvious that someone is just application dumping to every position that they see, rather than showing that they are really specifically interested in this position at this organization. So I think that's something, it is a ton of work to craft a cover letter or craft your resume and make tweaks so that it suits a particular employer that you're really interested in. But that is probably better to do for 6 employers than to just send out the same thing to 80 employers, because you really do want to show that there's interest in the position, in the employer, in the opportunities at that place, and that you've been thoughtful about how your experiences, both in your major and in your experiences abroad, studying in the US and in a broad scenario, how are those really equipping you to be the best candidate for that position at that employer. So I just will note that, even though that probably seems like very obvious career advice, it can feel, again, very frustrating if you're getting to April or May, where I see a couple of students are graduating next December. If you get to October, November, you're starting to get nervous. The inclination may be to just send out as many resumes and cover letters as possible. But that thoughtfulness and that being able to exhibit that you've really thought about that employer, that position is very powerful for people who are hiring. One of the other things that Monica talked about was looking for those positions in your home country and what are those relationships you can build there that might inform your time here. I think too, there is a tendency, and many of you are coming from different schools, so I don't know if this is true for you, but there's a tendency to go for those really big names that have a lot of experience hiring people, or they do show a commitment to sponsoring H-1B or all of those. And there's really a lot of opportunities in smaller markets with a smaller employer where that relationship is going to have a lot more power that you're building, and that connection is going to be a lot more powerful. And I'm looking at the student who was talking about landscape architecture. And Monica, you might have something more specific to say. I can't speak to the job market in the fall, but I can speak to you should probably be looking at what are some, where do you want to be? If you want to stay in Michigan, great, but where do you want to be? What kind of people do you want to be working with? And start making those connections now and building those relationships. And are you talking to your professors about who they know and who they would recommend, or about organizations that you've done some research for now that will equip you in 6 months to apply and submit a really effective application later in the fall when you're looking. So that would be kind of my advice there, is that research and that thoughtfulness in the application process is really important. And knowing that sponsorship is super important, or that long-term game in the US is super important. But really just acknowledging what needs to happen now. What are the important pieces now?
Yeah. I'll also say that Oh, Monica, you're muted. I'll just quickly say that we will have time for a question and answer later as well. And I also will give a little bit more information about the virtual career fair after the presentation from Leah and Monica, just so we have as many people as we can to get that information.
Perfect. Yeah, great. I'm so used to Zoom. I'm not used to Microsoft Teams. So sorry about that. Yeah, if you're going to graduate in December 2023, then, or whenever, definitely start making those connections now. Identify, your preferences of the locations, and then who are other people that are working in that same industry or area, and definitely reaching out to them to talk to them about, because yeah, I'm not familiar with landscape architecture and what their recruiting timeline might be, but December might be a great time because they have to plan so much for the spring and summer, I would imagine, in Michigan and Indiana anyway. But I would be reaching out now to alumni and employers that you can identify that are attractive to you. I'm looking at I want to learn how I proceed with the green card process after STEM OPT expires that I failed through. Wow.
Very frustrating, yes.
Yeah.
Allie, I think that we're finished with kind of the formal presentation. We'd be glad to more formally jump into Q&A unless you have a different, anything else that you'd like to make sure that we touch on.
No, that sounds great. And I can go ahead and redo the questions. I'll quickly also mention, just because I know that there are some more people here than when we started, and I gave a brief introduction. So in the chat, there is a link to our career fair. Ironically, we have someone signed up to be an employer for our career fair who is from an architecture firm. So, that would be a good opportunity for the person who mentioned that they were studying architecture to at least meet with someone who has done this. Like Monica said, she wasn't sure how how it would be set up. So basically, you will have a chance to schedule a time to meet with the employer. So you'll probably have 15 minutes, a one-on-one meeting with that employer. So currently we're still getting employers signed up and we're still getting students signed up. So we won't open up sign up to meet with people at specific times until a week before. And then throughout the day on the 25th, you'll have like 15-minute windows where you can meet with employers. You'll set up that schedule ahead of time. But I just wanted to let you know that's how the career fair is going to look. So I'm going to start sort of reading questions in the chat. I want to make sure I start at the top because I believe you responded to Yiki Zhang's question already, Leah. And then we did the architecture one. Okay. We have someone who said, my employer states that they will sponsor a green card after 3 years of good standing with the company. I'm on STEM OPT, so it allows me to work for 3 years. I want to learn how I proceed with the green card process after the STEM OPT expires, given that I failed the lottery 3 times.
Yeah, and I should just say you did not fail the lottery. That is I hope that's not the feeling that you're feeling. Unfortunately, it is a lottery. It's just a chance. I know people who have entered it 9 times and just were not successful. It can be incredibly discouraging. So I'm really sorry, especially when you see people around you. You're like, well, you got it on the first time. Why am I still waiting? It is a lottery, so you did not fail it. And I did answer in the chat, and I would give this answer for most work-sponsored immigration statuses, is that you are responsible to manage an F1 status and the work benefit associated with a student status, right? OPT, CPT, academic training, the student is responsible to work with the university to manage that. For applications like the H-1B and O, a TN, the green card application process, it is the employer's responsibility to work with an experienced immigration attorney to make sure that that application is filed appropriately, and you should be told exactly what you need in order to move that application forward. So I said that our office manages that process for the university, and similarly, employers should be working with someone to do that. So if someone comes to you and says, hey, can you work on this? Can you pay the fees? Can you do this? That is not a good situation. The employer has to file that petition on your behalf. It is not your personal petition, versus when you applied for your student visa or you applied for OPT, those were personal petitions that you were responsible to file. So I think that is helpful for everybody in the room.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I did see that you responded, Leah. Sorry, it was a little bit lower on in the chat. I want to just go ahead and invite people to unmute or send a message in the chat if they'd like to ask any other questions. I also wanted to mention that we, on the career fair, we will have a way for you to sort through employers who have sponsored visas, H-1B visas before. We asked them, you know, are you willing? Some of them said maybe, but usually when they say maybe, it's because they lack the understanding of how that works, which is part of what the High Scale Immigration Fund, you know, what the goals are for this fund is to let employers know how this works, let them know that it's not as daunting as it sounds. Okay, we have another question. Okay, Ichi said that he is currently a student at Michigan Ann Arbor, looking for a summer internship, has submitted more than 200 applications, but only got one interview for several positions that are more like marketing and designing. I wonder if it's worth doing some job that is not related to my major, or if I should just take some CS classes during the summer. I need to get in FAANG after I graduate. Thank you for any advice.
I'll jump in and say, so following your sophomore year, both of those things could be very valuable. Taking classes, of course, and if you're computer science, then definitely the higher you can get your skill level, the better off you'll be. But getting some business experience can be valuable, even if it is not in the direct area that you're looking for. But the skill level is so important in computer engineering and computer science that taking those classes and, you know, practicing for the technical interviews that you will face for the junior internships could be very valuable for you.
And I would just say, because you mentioned CPT before, Ichi, that you do have to ensure that any employment you take is directly connected to the major that's listed on your I-20. And even if you have a minor, that is not eligible for work authorization. So the major that is listed, or majors that are listed on your I-20, that is what you are eligible to pursue employment. But you can be creative. There may be reasons that marketing does suit with your computer science degree, that you could make an argument that that is actually connected based on the curriculum at your university. So that is going to be different for every student, assuming that you are at a different university, because the curriculum for your program is going to be different at each university. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to justify accurately and with not too much trickiness, hey, this is connected to my major because of X, Y, and Z. This is how it's building on the skills that I have learned in my program. And this is how I'm utilizing the degree that I earned, the degree that I earned that's listed on my I-20. This is how this position is using my degree. I would go back to that 200 is a lot. And so I'd be curious about your strategy for how many of those 200 applications were you submitting the same information? Were you submitting the same cover letter? Again, I don't have any information about that, but where can you reflect on that process and think, okay, how strategic is it to submit 200 applications? Sometimes that's the right strategy. And sometimes the strategy might be, are there 5 employers or 10 employers I really want to focus on? And I'm going to think about the things that Monica talked about, the LinkedIn connection, the career fair conversation, the relationships that I might already have because of the professors in my major, or other classmates or alum. I know I can only speak for Notre Dame's alum network, but that is really powerful in connecting our current students to internship opportunities. And so that may be true at your institution as well, is reaching out to an alum, not writing and saying, hey, I'm looking for a job, can you help me? But hey, I'm really struggling to find a position that really suits the degree. Could I talk with you a little bit about strategies that you used when you found your current position, right? So there's just that slight different framing, takes a little bit more time, but it can be a little bit more strategic as well.
Thank you so much. Shivangi flagged another question that I missed earlier in the chat. So, and I'm not sure if you, Leah and Monica, can actually answer this question, but I will put it out there. Patience asked if an international student can start a business.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will say that every university probably advises on this a little bit differently. You can, if you are an F1 student, start a business using your optional practical training. So the first 12 months of OPT, you can start a business. You can report that self-employment or that business employment as employment as a part of the OPT reporting process. The challenge comes when students who are STEM eligible want to apply for the STEM extension. And there are severe limitations on what kind of employment is allowed during the STEM OPT extension. So OPT, you are eligible to be self-employed. You can have multiple short-term employers. So you can have a 3-month internship plus a 3-month internship. You can have a couple of different part-time employers that are helping you meet that 20-hour threshold that's required for full-time employment during OPT. You can have gig work if you are in music or theater or in something that kind of requires a gig work mentality. You can have a really traditional employer-employee relationship, and you can start your own business during OPT. Once you get to STEM OPT, the regulations are pretty clear, as is the USCIS website, the SAVP website, that there has to be a bona fide employer-employee relationship. So we have had students come to us who are both F1 students and said, hey, can we start a business together? And during OPT, we run that business, but then during STEM OPT, this F1 student is my supervisor and I'm her supervisor, because then we have a bona fide employer-employee relationship, right? I have a supervisor. That's really what that means, is you have a supervisor. Someone is training you. They have oversight over your work. You are not the founder of a company. A board of trustees is not overseeing your work. You have a supervisor that has been hired by that employer. That's what that bona fide employer-employee is. For an F1 student to be supervising another F1 student, if you want to collaborate in that way, unfortunately, it explicitly says in the guidelines that that is not allowed. So students have often tried to start that business. Occasionally, they'll try and do it with maybe a US citizen who could provide that supervision, but it does become much more challenging to pursue entrepreneurship, to pursue that business with the in the STEM OPT. First 12 months, not a problem. I will also say that there's not a mechanism really for you to turn that business after 12 months of OPT into a business that allows you a different kind of work authorization. The regs just haven't quite caught up to that opportunity yet. So 12 months, yes. More than that, it gets a little bit more complicated. We'd probably say talk to an experienced immigration attorney. If you get into that, you want to continue to work with that business. And we would also just say you have to have authorization. So some students ask us, can I start this business in the final semester of my senior year? And some of those activities are going to be okay that you're starting a business. Maybe you're doing market research. But as soon as you start day-to-day operations of a business, then you should have authorization to continue so that you're not violating your student status. So I'll just make sure that that's clear. And also talk to your international office.
I'll just jump back to the student that had 200 applications too. I would say definitely reach out to your career center, because it could be something with your resume, or it could be the follow-up, but they can absolutely help you sort through that, like what's going on there.
Thank you so much. I want to be cognizant of your time. It's really been a pleasure to have you, Leah, and Monica here to present with us. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I want to give a last question. Oh, okay, we have a question, but I want to just promptly end at 1, because I know that something came up, so we do need to end at 1. But I'll go ahead and read this question. Anyad asked, I wanted to know about the EB1, EB2, and EB3 statuses as well. Are we eligible to apply for those after OPT?
Yes, so again, those are going to be in the same category as that H, that TN, that O, in which the employer is going to be responsible to file a petition for that status. But there is nothing about being an F1 OPT student that prevents you from moving to another status to be able to continue working in the US. You just have to meet the requirements, the eligibility requirements for that visa status. And generally, you would need employer sponsorship. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. I think that you gave such great information that we just didn't have that many questions. So I will go ahead and post the recording of this on our website, southbendin.gov/HSIF. At that website, if anyone knows other students who are interested in signing up to be part of the career fair, they can find a link to that. Sign up on the website. Any employers that anyone else might know who might be interested, the link is also there for them. And of course, our contact information. If you have any other questions, we do want to give the caveat that we can't necessarily answer your legal questions. So obviously prioritize, your career center, your international office, and any other legal support that you have. But we can do the best we can. We also just want to let everyone on this call know that South Bend is a place that's looking to add more international talent to our region, and so please keep us in mind when you are looking for positions. Would be happy to connect you with our employers here however we can. So thank you so much again, and thank you, Leah and Monica, so much.
Thanks so much, Allie. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.